Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Cindie Chavez here. It is Wednesday, January the 10th, 2018, 8 a.m. Eastern Time, with your first daily dose of happy. And good morning, everybody. I hope you're off to a great start today. I know we are. And we've got a different topic from what we've been doing lately. We've been doing topics that were on broader topics in some ways topics that are on the more interesting stuff, like the making of the money or the attracting of the great health or the house or whatever, that kind of stuff. We've been doing a lot of that kind of thing, but we're going to get back to relationships this morning because it was something that I've been noticing, particularly in Facebook groups. A lot of discussion, Cindie, about using the law of attraction to attract back an ex. So we figured we would do a show on using the law of attraction to bring back an ex. How's that for a creative title?
I think it's a creative title. I think it's an evergreen topic. Like I said to you earlier, I don't go a week without an email in my inbox with someone asking me for help with this. So it's definitely something that's getting discussed, like you said. So sure, let's talk about it today.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, there's one group that I follow on Facebook just because there's a lot of activity in it, and I swear there must be 2 or 3 people who raise it per day in that group. So a lot of people focus on it in a big, big way, and it's always interesting the post that accompanies the request for help on it almost always has the same tone to it, and the tone is of, please, I'm desperate to bring this person back. How do I do it?
Yeah, heartbreak is painful.
It is.
And I remember when I was a child, my mom said to me, she said, pain is king. And I can't even remember. I was a little kid, and I can't remember the topic, how that conversation got started or what we were really talking about. But I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, what that means is that when you're in pain, you'll pretty much do anything for it to stop. And when I think about this whole idea, that's where my mind starts out. It goes back to heartbreak. And when people have their heart broken, I've had my heart broken. It's not fun. As a matter of fact, one of the things that I have for free over at my website, which is cindiechavez.com, is a book, Healing for a Broken Heart.
Oh, wow.
And it's one of the first little booklets that I put together. And I remember one day thinking to myself, I was kind of going back and forth about what I was putting out into the world. And then it just hit me that I really couldn't think of anything more noble in that moment than was to help somebody that was heartbroken find healing for their broken heart, because it's really painful and it's just not a fun place to be. And so I believe that most of the time when you see somebody wanting to find ways to use the law of attraction, or actually any other method, right, to get back an ex, it's because they're suffering from a broken heart. And it's painful, and they don't like it, and they want to change that. And I have had people tell me that they have a lot of good memories of, that, and I think, the whole idea of the grass being greener, I think that sometimes when people are suffering from a broken heart and they look back and they start remembering all these wonderful things that they want to have again in their relationship, that there may be a little bit of that grass greening going on, because there is a reason why they're exes.
This is true. Yeah, relationships don't break up just because.
And so whatever that reason is, sometimes I think it might get discounted, and what happens is it's easier to see all the wonderful things. And it's kind of like the same exact thing that we go through and talk about with law of attraction in general, right? It's like I opened the book Ask and It Is Given. Is that the one you're reading right now, Walt?
It's one that I'm doing a chapter by chapter with David on Sundays.
Okay, I thought that was when you were going through. I opened it just kind of randomly.
Okay.
And the page that I opened it to and looked at this morning, it said, there's always two thoughts. Everything has two different thoughts attached. It's the lack of it and having it.
Right.
It's like I want more money. I hate not having enough money.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be in better health. Or I don't like having this cold I've got right now. Right. So it's like two sides of the same coin. And I think that's kind of what happens there. Is it's like things were so good, but let's not talk about why this relationship this person is an ex, why this relationship has broken up.
And on top of that, the other way of describing the lack is I had this relationship that had its pluses and minuses before, but now I lack the relationship. It's like it's missing. I'm focused on this missing, and this missing is my entire life right now.
And that's a good point, because that's actually what happens, is that it becomes, and this can happen with anything, but we get obsessive over it, right? The person becomes where that's the only thing they're thinking of. And also the sense that if I just had this person back, everything would be better. Everything would be right. And so I get these kind of emails a lot. And the thing that I always want to point out is that, first of all, and it's kind of funny, a lot of people ask me, can you help me with this?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of things to talk about here, because, first of all, the whole idea that you can create whatever you want, right? We talk about this a lot as law of attraction coaches, as teachers. We're always saying, like, you can have whatever you want.
Sure.
If you can focus on it, if you can believe for it, and then all of a sudden there's this, okay, well, then I want to get back this X. And this is where I say, okay, but here's what we need to talk about, is that now we're talking about another person that also has the ability to have what they want.
Right.
And so where do we draw the line? How is it okay for me to decide what other people get? Because a happy, healthy, good relationship is one that is mutually desired by both members.
It's the only
both
kind
partners have to want this, right?
It's the only kind that's worthwhile.
Yeah, and so my friend Jeanette Ma, my very close friend and colleague, has a blog post that she wrote because she gets asked the same question over and over. She is a law of attraction coach. She is the law of attraction coach. I tease her that. She's fantastic. But she has a blog post that she wrote called "The Voodoo I Don't Do."
Oh, okay.
And it's very funny because she kind of wrote it in a Dr. Seuss style poem, right? But she gets asked this question all the time too, and she just says, "No, I'm not doing that kind of work where I call it manipulation. I think it gets very close to manipulating another person to come back." And so my question for people that come to me and say, I really want this guy back, and I hear this a lot from women. I have heard it from men as well. But the common denominator, or one of them, like you said, you saw this common denominator, is that the tone is like desperation.
Mm.
Yes, I see that too. And I also see a common thing of like asking, like saying they won't talk to me. Like I text them and they don't text me back. I call them and they won't return my calls. And my question is always, why do you want to be with someone that doesn't want to be with you?
Mm. Yeah, that's a great question, and it's one that gets overlooked.
Well, it's the question that I asked myself when I was in the same situation of a very, very difficult marriage and divorce. And I was just getting into law of attraction, and I was having some huge wins with law of attraction. Like, it was amazing, and I was excited about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I had two, grown children that were in college that were doing great. I had a beautiful house. I had everything in my life was going pretty well, and I thought that my relationship was going pretty well, but it had been becoming more and more stressful. And then suddenly my husband just said, I don't want to be married anymore. And that was really difficult, and I was really heartbroken, and I decided, what can I do? what can I do to fix this?
Mm-hmm.
What can I think? How can I focus? What am
Sure.
I doing wrong? What can I do to fix this? And I really was giving it my best shot. And it wasn't working. Things were not getting better. As a matter of fact, things began to get much, much worse.
Ooh.
And I realized that I didn't really have strong boundaries at all. And so I began to put those boundaries in place and strengthen them. I began to do some things in my life, especially with law of attraction, that created a sense of empowerment. And the more I did these things, the worse everything seemed to get relationship-wise. And that's not a fun place to be either. And then one day I asked myself the question that really, it's funny, as a coach, I ask people questions, and once in a while I'll have somebody tell me that a question was so powerful it just changed their whole thinking. That's a great experience, but this is a question I asked myself. I said, suddenly it was like my higher self spoke to me, why do you want to be with someone that doesn't want to be with you? And everything shifted at that point. I mean, it was like night and day. I was stunned at my own question and realized I don't want to be with someone that doesn't want to be with me. I want someone who is crazy about me. I want someone who wants to be with me. Mm-hmm. I want someone who wants to be, wants to build a great relationship with me. Someone who's mutually interested in the idea of a happy, healthy, wonderful, fun-filled relationship. And that's what I have now for the past 7 years, and it's been wonderful and amazing, and I love every minute of it. It's so different. And so that's my thing is, can you use law of attraction to win back an ex? My idea is, if this ex is someone who doesn't want to be with you, then that's the real issue that needs to be dealt with.
And by the same token, if it's somebody who does want to be with you, you're not going to have to win them back.
Right. If you're the person that's decided that the relationship isn't working for you, because remember, if one of you thinks the relationship isn't working, it's not working.
Right.
And, that sounds pretty obvious, but apparently it's not to some people.
Well, it's not when you're in the middle of that broken heart. That's the thing.
Exactly. And that's the thing, is that when your heart is broken, it affects the way you think and the way you feel. And so when people say, that they really want this person back and the person they want back doesn't want to be with them, then there's a problem. So sometimes people will say, well, my spouse thinks that our relationship isn't working, but I think it's working fine. Well, if one of you thinks it's not working, then that needs to be dealt with.
It really is.
So I stand with my friend Jeanette in that's the voodoo I don't do.
You raised an interesting question there. I got to ask you before you move on. You raised the word boundaries. And that's a really, really important topic, one that I think gets glossed over. And I suspect if we were able to see into the questions behind the questions, the events behind the questions of people who are asking, how do I attract back an ex, we would probably see a lot of boundary issues. And I suspect that in many cases they aren't even clear what a boundary issue is. So let's define it. What is a boundary issue?
Oh, I'm so glad you said that, because you're absolutely right. A lot of people don't have strong boundaries. A lot of us don't. And here is what I believe makes a strong boundary. And it's important. And that is that a lot of people realize that they need stronger boundaries, and they think that a boundary is to keep someone else, to change someone else's behavior, right? Like, in other words, well, I'll give you a story that I tell to a client that makes a lot of sense about boundaries.
Okay.
And why we set them and how we use them and what intention we have when we set them to make them work. Because, of course, having boundaries that are weak or don't work, that's like having, a fence in your yard that's trampled down and everyone walks right through it.
That's good.
Right?
That's right. Yeah, it's exactly what it is.
So we think of oftentimes in relationships, people think of boundaries like that fence. So it's like I'm putting up a fence to keep intruders out. But the subtle difference is putting up a fence to contain the experience you want to have in your yard. So I'm putting up a fence so that in this yard I can grow this beautiful garden and I can have this nice swimming pool or whatever's in there, right? I mean, I'm speaking metaphorically, but I'm creating an environment that I want to live in inside this boundary. Instead of I'm making this boundary to keep all this stuff out. Now, it will keep things out, but the story that I've told that seems to be really effective is a story about an imaginary person. We'll call her Mary. And Mary lives at the top of a hill, and at the bottom of her hill is a little cafe. And she loves their food. And she works from home, and she has this wonderful schedule. And when she gets done at about 6:30 every day, she walks down the hill, and she eats dinner at this little cafe. Well, the thing is at the cafe is that the sign hanging on the window says that they close at 6:30. And she usually winds up just rolling in right about the time they close.
Oh, dear.
But she knocks on the window, and they come to greet her, and they're always smiling, and they love her, and they're so happy to see her, and they always open up for her, and they put out a spread of food for her. And so, you know, she's special, right? They care about her, they love her, they let her in after the sign, and they serve her food. And it's, hey, man, it's perfect for everybody. But what she doesn't know is that in the back room, after they open the door and they go back to get her food, they're all back there grumbling. They want to go home. We're supposed to be closed at 6:30. They're grumbling, and they're not quite happy that they can't get on with their own life and live that part of their life, the part after work, because Mary's sitting out there.
Right.
But put the smile back on, and they come out, and they tell her how much they love her, and they serve her the food. Okay, now, some people would say, Mary doesn't have any boundaries. She shows up when the door says they're closed. Well, no, they don't have any boundaries.
Yes.
They have weak boundaries because they open the door, right?
Right.
I guarantee if they at some point would say, sorry, we're closed at 6:30. If you want to eat, you have to be here at least by 6 so we can serve you. Will she stop coming? Maybe. Maybe not. Maybe for a while she'll still come and knock. But if their boundaries are strong and they say, sorry, we close at 6:30, eventually she'll go find somewhere else to eat. And they'll get to go home and have, like, their life. Now, they're not doing this if they make the intention to change her behavior. What will happen the first time she comes back on that next day and knocks is they'll say this boundary doesn't even work. I put this boundary up and she still keeps coming. Because our boundaries always get tested. If you want to know if boundaries get tested, just put a fence around a playground and see how many kids will go play at the fence.
Right.
They'll play right at the edge, right?
Absolutely, of course.
Boundaries get tested. But your boundaries are for you. They're to give you the experience that you're desiring. And then every time we let the boundaries down, and often do it with a smile like the restaurant staff did with Mary, smiling and pretending that everything's okay, because we want to be seen as nice and we want to be seen as generous. But inside, that's not really what's going on. Mm-hmm. Inside, we're uncomfortable, and inside, we're resisting, and inside, we're wishing that we could just go home and have the rest of our life and be done with work or whatever. You have to fit this to your, this is just a story, right? But a teaching story. But that's the difference between a strong boundary and a boundary that has a right intention, the intention of serving you and not of changing someone else's behavior.
Yes, I agree. That's really a good example because it shows just how important it is for the person who, like you say, is being friendly and is being kind and so forth, how important it is for them to set boundaries for their own benefit. I would add one other point, which is Mary also does have a boundary issue, but it's a different kind of boundary issue. Her boundary issue is that she doesn't even consider the boundaries of others. Even though there was a sign up there that said close at 6:30, she just blew right past that. She didn't really care about that. So she's probably somebody who has a lot of experience with stuff appearing out of the blue. Like, I went to this diner for years, and then all of a sudden they wouldn't serve me anymore. I mean, where did that come from?
That's a good point, because I guarantee there are other places that she would go that are closed, and they're really closed, and they're not going to answer the door. So
Right.
she doesn't go to those places,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
She doesn't go there. Yeah, good point. And so I like the way you found that. Things happening out of the blue, when really they didn't.
Not at all.
And if we think about this in relationships, and I want to be careful of watching our time today, because I know that you've got a message that you want to bring. So actually, I'm going to let you do that now, and then I want to talk about this, because this is important.
It is important, and that's why we want to take a moment to invite you. If you have been enjoying this and getting value out of this, and you're going to get more, I can promise you, because Cindie is a wealth of information about this kind of thing. But if you're enjoying this, we just want you to take a moment and share it with friends, on your social media circles or offline, emails, anybody that you think of that has an interest in the law of attraction and might even have some interest in relationship issues. Please share this episode with them, because we want to get LOA Today into the hands of as many people as possible. Those people who know about it and who become listeners are loyal listeners. I mean, we're seeing it in the numbers. They just listen to episode after episode after episode. So we just want to make sure more and more people get that chance to find out about us and to enjoy the same daily dose of happy that you're getting. So just wanted to insert that. Now back to our regularly scheduled program.
Well, I'm thinking about this whole idea of boundaries and a word that you just said, and I can get persnickety about words sometimes, but this one I think is important. It's the word nice. And here's what I think about being nice. I think we do too much of it. Now, that doesn't mean people often will translate me saying that to saying that I think we should be mean. And I don't think we should be mean. I think that we should always be kind. There's always a place to be kind. And in our story, in our teaching story of the cafe and Mary, the owner could certainly be kind about telling her, I'm just not going to open up anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
There doesn't have to be meanness.
Not
it can be kind. But nice is when we put the fake smile on. Nice is when we laugh at an inappropriate joke at someone else's expense. Nice is when we go way far and above doing for someone else when inside we know our own needs aren't being met. Nice doesn't really ever serve anyone. And so kindness is always a win. Kindness is pretty much always appropriate, and we always can be kind when we're setting strong boundaries. And yet, in relationships, it's one of the things I see that, just like you said, eventually down the road, well, I don't know what happened. I thought everything was fine, and then it just all blew up. It often comes because someone is being nice.
Mm-hmm.
They're being nice and nice and nice, and not really paying attention to what's going on. And we do it for all sorts of reasons. The intentions around niceness, generally speaking, are honorable. It's that someone wants to make other people happy. Someone wants to be generous. They want to be compassionate. They want to have a reputation for being a nice person. I'm kind of making air quotes over here because it's like I just want people to think I'm nice. I don't want people to say bad things about me. I want to be nice. And so what happens is this over-giving and over-sharing and over-generosity where they're worn out.
As you were
and
describing,
they start to get resentful. That's where resentment starts coming in.
Oh, absolutely. As you were talking about the difference, as you see it, between kind and nice, and then you said kindness, I said to myself, like in the back of my head, I heard like a light switch go on. I said, the word is kindness, not kind nice.
Huh, nice. I like that. Yeah, kindness. We can always, and it's kind of a fun thing to, when you have to be, when you've decided to set a boundary. Look, boundaries, when I bring up the word boundaries to clients, oftentimes it's an audible people don't like to talk about boundaries. People don't like to set boundaries all the time. And I think it's because they anticipate it's going to be hard, or I'm going to come off looking like I'm mean.
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to be mean and nasty. I don't want to be hardcore and go in here and set these strong boundaries, but it doesn't have to be that way at all.
Or even I'm going to get kicked in the teeth if I do it.
Well, this is the place where the kindness comes in, and even empathy. This is the place where it can become a little bit of a fun puzzle to figure out, okay, what is the kindest way that I can, communicate this? Because it can be. Boundary setting can be done with kindness. And so going way back to winning back an ex, it's important to look at the situation and really be aware of what's really going on. Because, like we said, when your heart's broken and you're in pain, your brain and your emotions can be really erratic at that point. And why is that? Well, think about other kinds of pain. Think about when someone's in excruciating physical pain. Sometimes, their thought processes are going to be a little different than they would be if they weren't feeling so much pain.
Absolutely.
Going back to my mom saying, pain is king. People will often be willing to do just about anything to just relieve the pain. And so it's important to take some time and take a look at what's going on. Take a look at your own set of boundaries. And I love what Brené Brown says about boundaries. She says that, and I'm paraphrasing, but it's simple. It's at the very basic level, a boundary is just letting someone know what's okay and what's not okay.
Yeah, that's right. In fact, that thing makes me think of something. You're talking about the little scenario you set up of the diner and Mary, and the diner staff want to be nice to Mary, and it occurs to me, in being nice to Mary, they're actually doing Mary a disservice, because what they're doing is they're encouraging Mary to believe that if she moves past what she knows to be a good boundary, that it's an okay thing.
Right.
Which is really not true at all.
Yeah, no, and what happens down the road, everything blows up in Mary's face, and she says, what happened? Like, they were always so nice to me. They always encouraged me to come in, and then all of a sudden, wow, what happened to them? And she's looking at them possibly like they're the ones that are going off the rails, right? When really this resentment had been building over time. And so you're right about that, is that they're not doing anyone a service. And when we have weak boundaries or non-existent boundaries, we're really not helping anyone. And so that's one of the things I thought was so striking about what Brené Brown said, is she said oftentimes, she said that what she found, and she's a scientist, if you haven't seen her TED Talk on vulnerability, it's fantastic. And of course she's written some best-selling books, but she is a scientist that has researched things like shame and boundaries, and she puts her findings out there, and she said that it shocked her to find that the people with the strongest boundaries were also the most compassionate people.
Which makes sense when you think about it, because you really can't be compassionate without a strong boundary. It seems weird to say that, perhaps, but you really can't be. There's no way to do it. And the people who were the people who were in the diner proved it. They proved that they were not being compassionate. They thought they were.
Right. So outwardly, they're working on it, right?
Yeah.
They're like wanting to put the smile on and walk out and be happy and treat their customers well, but inside they're resentful because their boundary's not being honored. And it's not being honored because they're not keeping it strong. They're not honoring their own boundary.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably one of the things that we have to take a look at, is that I've heard people say, like, I've asked so-and-so not to call me after 10 o'clock at night, and they don't have any boundaries at all. They just keep calling. I'm like, well, you keep answering. It's your boundaries. You don't have boundaries, right? Let it go to voicemail. And so it's on us to create boundaries that keep us in a place where we can have the experiences we want to have. And it's on us to enforce those boundaries by honoring them. Like, we have to honor them first. And that's one of the things I see in relationship is that everything is a big mirror. So as far as law of attraction and relationship, whatever we're getting is probably what we're also giving to ourselves first. When I was in a marriage where I wasn't being respected, I wasn't really respecting myself.
Mm.
And how do I know that? Because I was staying in a relationship where someone didn't respect me.
Right.
I was basically saying it's okay, just like the restaurant owner was saying it's okay. Yeah, I know the sign says 6:30 we close, but hey, you're here, come on in.
I'm a rug, okay. Walk on me.
Yeah, and so, I know that we took a vow to honor each other and respect each other, and you're not, but it's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that's basically what I was saying without really knowing it. I've told that story before about always deferring. There was a time in my life where I was always deferring to everyone. And I catch myself still today doing it sometimes. But every question, what do you want for dinner? Where do you want to go? What restaurant? Oh, I don't care. Let's go where you want. Is there a movie you want to see? Oh, I don't care. Well, let's just see what you want. Like, I always was deferring, and not just in my intimate relationship, but with my friends, with everyone, with my kids. And I did it thinking, here was the part, I was really thinking that that I was just easygoing, that I was just generous, right? But over time, I remember that some people that I was involved with, a group I was involved with, made some plans without me one time. And here's the thing, that they were plans I would have agreed to. They were great plans. Mm-hmm. But for some reason, I got really upset when I found out that the plans got made without me. And I can't tell you I heard an audible voice, but, man, I heard loud and clear the universe speak to me and say, oh, I'm sorry, well, I thought you wanted to be last, so you always put yourself last, so I just put you last.
That's true, yeah.
And I realized that, oh, my goodness, like the more I did it, the more situations I got into where no one even considered me. People stopped asking me what I wanted. Well, of course they did. Every time they asked me, I said I didn't care. Why would they keep asking? And so in that moment, I changed everything. I was like, okay. And I started answering the questions. Someone asked me, what restaurant do you want to go to? Man, it was hard at first. I realized I hadn't done it in a long time. I would just dig down deep, and I would just pull out an answer from somewhere. It's like, I don't even know. If I don't know, I'll make something up. But I started standing in my own power a little bit when people asked me things, and things started to shift.
I can add to that. I can add to that story a bit because it's an issue I've had for sure, and my wife has challenged me on it. That's one advantage and / disadvantage of being married to a former psychotherapist because you don't get away with a lot. And one of the things that she wouldn't let me get away with was never having a preference on, should we go here to go out to eat? Where would you like to go to eat? What do you want to do today? And I would never have a preference, and I really didn't. I mean, it just didn't matter to me at all. Do you want to have chicken or do you want to have fish? I don't care. I really didn't care. What I didn't realize is that by constantly not caring, I was basically demonstrating that I had cut myself off from my own preferences. I didn't realize that. Yes. I had no idea that was going on.
Well, and I'm glad you said that because that was my experience too. I can't say, that I made some conscious intention from the get-go to always make sure to defer to everyone. It wasn't that at all. It was, I didn't really know that I was doing it all the time until, like you said, this is fantastic. You cut yourself off from your preferences. And here's what we know about law of attraction. You've got to be in touch with your preferences.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and
I mean,
that's where I really learned it, actually. When I was trying to learn how the law of attraction works and it got down to the preferences thing, I realized I was in trouble because I didn't have a history of wanting things, of preferring this thing over that. And I mean, it's to this day, I still have problems with it at times. It's like, what do I prefer? I don't know what I prefer. Well, I better find something, otherwise nothing's going to happen.
It's such a good point. So, yeah, I mean, that's exactly. So in relationships, we're talking about, can I win back an ex using law of attraction? This is all really pertinent to that question because in relationship, it's really important that we know our preferences and that our preferences are known and honored. Now, that doesn't mean that I get my way all of the time.
No, of course not.
Because in relationship, we honor each other's preferences as well.
Right.
But there has to be some kind of balance and knowing that that's what makes a relationship and not just a one-sided entanglement. There's a difference.
It makes the relationship, but it also makes it possible to have a happy life. You can't really have a happy life on a consistent basis unless you have preferences that you express. And one of the ways that I learned that was when I read about a guy who is a researcher, and I'm thinking he's at UCLA, and I can't tell you what his name is because I believe it's an Indian name that, for me, is completely and totally unpronounceable. So, don't even go there. I'm not going to try. But this guy was an interesting guy in that he has a history of researching people, working with people who have brain damage. And most commonly, the brain damage of the people he works with is in the areas of the brain that are associated with emotions and the expression of emotions. So what this actually works out to is that most of the time they can't easily connect to their emotions, or they can't even connect at all. They just can't do it. The physical hardware is missing. I'm not totally convinced that that is an accurate description, but that's the description he gives, so I go with it for now. Anyway, he tells how he's got this sadistic side, I have to say. He has this little thing that he likes to do with his clients, his research subjects. He likes to say, let's go out to lunch. And the client says, sure. He says, well, so you pick, where are we going to go? And it inevitably goes something like this. Well, says the client, there is restaurant A, and they've got really good food, but there's also like an hour wait to get in there. So, we really don't want to wait an hour. Now, there's also restaurant B, but their food isn't quite as good. Now, restaurant C, their food is good, but they're like, that's an hour trip away. So they're plus the time of waiting. That's going to be a really long wait. Restaurant D, I haven't heard a whole lot about restaurant D. Maybe we shouldn't really go there because we really don't know about that. They'll never be able to come up with an answer because emotions are required in order to have a preference. And when I heard that you had to have connection to emotion in order to establish a preference, that's when I realized that the times that I don't establish and express a preference are the times when I'm disconnected from my own emotions. And I said, oh my God. It was just a blinding
eye opener, isn't it?
Oh, it really is. It just blew me away.
So it's making me think about something that I see happen in relationships, and this is kind of a mind blower for me thinking about it right now. But oftentimes in a relationship where someone is not getting treated the way they desire to be treated, or they're not getting the attention that they need, or they're not getting heard, seen and heard, those being seen and being heard are basic human needs.
Right.
And I believe that that's why social media has blown up so much, because people go on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram and they feel seen and heard.
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
Okay, so when someone is not having that basic human need met within their relationship, then they often kind of numb out to emotion.
Yes.
Because we don't want to hurt. This is pain is king again, right? It's like it's painful for me to go through life in a relationship where I'm not being seen, where I'm not being heard. So I start to turn those, I'm picturing your virtual mixing board there, right? My emotional mixing board, I'm pulling all those pegs down because I don't want to feel this. It hurts too much. And so we start turning that knob down, those emotions down. What happens then? We lose our preferences.
By the way, what Cindy's talking about, when I'm engineering the sound on the show, I literally have a piece of software on my computer screen. It's a virtual mixing board, and it's got little levers that I can use with my mouse to push up and down to increase the volume here or decrease the volume there. So that's what she's talking about here.
Well, it's funny. I actually have a client that is a musician and a sound person that said to me one day that they were scoring or keeping track, shouldn't say scoring, just keeping track of how things were working in their life. they actually had drawn a mixing board with little, instead of like some people draw a circle and like a pie shape, and they'll say, well, this area is really great. No, they had a mixing board. So I always think about that in my head. So if you're in this situation where you're not being seen and heard in a relationship, and you start to numb out a little bit because of that, because that's painful, so like, I'm not going to let this bother me, then in toning down all those emotions, because often people are worried about expressing emotions that aren't happiness and joy. We talked about this before, right? All those emotions that we're sort of like trained not to express, anger and frustration, like a lot of people judge those as bad emotions or negative emotions. Don't bring your negative emotions around here, right? I always say, no, emotions aren't positive and negative. They're just emotions.
They are.
They're all valuable, right? So when we start tamping those down, then we're disconnecting from our preferences, which is the big aha moment you just gave me with that. And so then we get into a place where suddenly we don't have any preferences, and we're like, yeah, I don't care. I don't know, whatever you want. We can't make a preference. We can't figure out what it is. I think it's all tied together.
It is.
So,
sure, because the whole idea of emotions just being, emotions, like you were just saying, do we call them positive and negative? Sure, we do. And the reason we do is that the positive emotions are the things we prefer. The negative ones are the things we don't prefer. And that's what we really mean when we say that they're positive or negative, feel good, not feel good. We prefer this, we don't prefer that. That's the real meaning.
Yes. And so it's important to recognize that. It's important to be okay with the emotions that are on the lower end of the emotional scale.
Mm-hmm.
To recognize them as valuable, and when I say be okay with them, I don't mean that they become a preference. We don't prefer to feel sad or
you don't want to
angry
live
or
there.
frustrated or any of those things.
No.
We don't prefer them, but shutting them down is not helping.
Right.
Honoring them, recognizing that they have a really important message to tell us. They're there because I call it the voice of love. This is how our higher self, our wisdom, this is how it speaks to us through our feelings and emotions. It's the only voice it has.
That's
when
true.
we get a knot in our stomach, when we feel frustrated, our body is speaking to us. And when we don't listen, when our body whispers to us, eventually our body will be screaming at us, and that's when we get into the pain thing for real, and we have to pay attention.
It's also when we get into health issues.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I've had more than one client on the phone with me where there was actual physical pain, and by the end of the session, the physical pain had gone because it was just an out-picturing of something that was actually, it's funny, we have all these metaphors, right? We say a pain in the neck.
Right, yeah.
I mean, we have a lot, and that's how our body often speaks to us. Louise Hay wrote a book on it, You Can Heal Your Life, where she talks about the physical pain and malfunction of different body systems and what it's actually saying. So I love that you connected the preferences, the lack of preferences, to lack of emotion.
Yeah, it was a big thing.
That's fantastic.
It was a big deal, and it still is. I can't say I've totally ironed it out in my own life, but at least now I know what the issue is, what the real issue is, and I know where to focus my attention. So that's what I've been doing. I've been trying to practice having more preferences.
Well, and that was the thing that was so mind-blowing to me when I realized it that day. When I realized, and thank goodness for that sort of epiphany that happened, because it seemed like someone was just laying it out for me. I can't even feel like I can take credit for figuring out. It's just like, wow, okay, I've been deferring to everyone. I don't have any preferences here. I need to change that. And it was hard at first. Even a simple question like, where do you want to go for dinner? It was like that feeling that you have in your brain when you're doing like some kind of difficult math problem.
Yeah, right.
Like really straining. I would really have to go into this mode of like thought, figuring it out. What do I want? Because like you said, I realized I didn't really care. but I knew it was important to start caring.
Well, interestingly enough, for me, actually doing the math problem is easier.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
It is. Math is like my best subject. I do it. My wife's constantly asking me, so if this and this, how do I, what's the answer to that? Oh, it's this. Bang, done. It's like right off the top of my head. And she's taking hours to figure the thing out. Math is so easy for me compared to preferences and emotions.
So there you go. It's like taking the time to just make sure that you come up with a preference.
Yeah. Now, there is one other thing.
I encourage everyone to do that today.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
In any situation where you normally just wouldn't care and wouldn't have a preference,
Yeah, don't wait until you have a missing X or something like that. Do it right now. It's much better to do it now because this is the time where you can actually handle it.
Yes. And I think the one thing I'd like to address about that whole getting back an X is that it's the same thing we talk about with everything else that we have as a desire, is that we desire things because we think that having that thing will cause us to feel a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And it shows up in language. You hear people all the time, oh, well, I'll be happy when whatever.
Right.
Like, I'll be happy if I can just get this better job, lose these last 10 pounds, whatever it is. I'll be happy when. And the truth is, we can be happy now. And so when we talk about wanting to get back an X, it's just because we think that if we do that, it will bring a certain experience into our life. So what is that thing that you want, that you think you'll get back when you bring back the X?
Mm.
And, it can be a lot of answers to that question. Everyone's going to have a different answer. Maybe it's status, maybe it's security, maybe it's comfort or fun or whatever it is. There's going to be answers that feel right to people and wrong to some other people, but there's no right or wrong answers. It's just you think that having back your ex will cause you to feel something and cause you to have a certain quality of experience. So dig a little deeper and figure out what that is, and then start giving that to yourself. Give that to yourself. If you think you'll have more fun, then figure out something else that would bring some fun into your life.
Yeah. There's another aspect to that too, and I'm just realizing that we haven't really touched on it, but it shows up a lot in those posts I was talking about on Facebook, and that is very often the same people who are posting these questions about how to get an ex back and who are having boundary issues in many cases, they're also often the same people who talk about how that ex, in their minds, was their soulmate. We should talk about what soulmates are, because that's one of those topics that I think have it's kind of gotten out of control in some sense, because it's turned into a desperation thing. There's only one soulmate for me. That was it, and he's gone. My life is about to crumble.
Well, that's an interesting thought. I have been asked before what I think about that and if I believe in soulmates. And there's some differing thoughts about soulmates. Some people will tell you that your soulmates, and I say that with plural, I don't believe that there is one, there's billions of people on the planet. Do I really think that there's only one person on the planet that's a fit for me? No, I don't. I think that's crazy. I think that there are lots of potential people that would be a great fit for me. I want to find one of them. And so the person that I'm with, my spouse, we refer to each other as each other's soulmates. Do I think that if something happened to one of us today, that the other one would just be lost for eternity without a soulmate? No, of course not. I don't think that. There's also the train of thought or the idea that your soulmate is someone who is going to facilitate the most personal growth in your life. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I want to think about that too much. We all know what brings on the personal growth, right?
Yeah.
Right. So I don't believe that there's just one person. If we talk about the idea of soulmates, we can make it a plural and know that there are people that come into our life that we get a sense of knowing them before, or we get a sense of being immediately close. That's just like we just hit it off with this person, whether they're, intimate partners or just platonic friends. I have friends in my life that, it seems like the minute we met each other, we were just long-lost sisters,
Sure.
Just like, wow, where have you been? Like, you hear people say, oh, he's my brother from another mother, right? It's like family kind of relationship. And so to think that in the entire population of the planet there's just one for me, that's so limiting. Don't limit yourself that way. There are plenty of people out there that would be a fantastic fit for you, and maybe they're all your soulmates, right? So that's what I say to that. I think that is another symptom, that thought of desperation and, oh my gosh, I lost my soulmate, we have to be back together, we're soulmates. I also believe that we can be soulmates with someone and that it's not something that's intended to be forever, especially when we think about coming into each other's lives so that we can learn something.
I agree with you. I think there's also people who would be really taken aback by that because they believe that if you're a soulmate, you're a soulmate forever. And I think there's also an argument to be made for that, but not necessarily the way they think about it. And let me tell you why I think that. One of the things that I've learned about, particularly through Abraham Hicks, when learning about how the law of attraction works and how the universe is organized, so to speak, is that on the one hand, and they don't say this is me saying this, but this is the conclusion I've drawn by listening to them and to others. On the one hand, we are all one. We are all one energy field. The non-physical aspect of us is energy. We're all part of that same energy. On the other hand, we're all individuals. And that sounds like a paradox the first time you say it. But when you think about it, what you realize is, sure, it's like being part of the same family. Doesn't mean that the individuals in the family aren't individuals. It just means they're also part of a family. There's really no contradiction between being part of the one and an individual. Well, right. Here's the thing. If you're part of the one, that means everybody in one way or another is your soulmate. Because your soul is your inner being. And these are all the people you're connected to throughout eternity. Well, that means everybody on one level or another is your soulmate. So now we have to ask ourselves, so what do we mean by a soulmate? Because what some people are trying to say is a soulmate is the one and only person who can make me feel X. And that's where they go off the rails.
And the one and only person that can make you feel X is you.
Exactly.
And that's why I said, I had this conversation with someone yesterday about synchronicities. And I said, look, whenever I hear someone say, that they had a synchronicity, and they say they love experiencing synchronicities because they recognize that they're on the right track, I get a little squirmy when I hear that, and I'll tell you why. And I'm not saying that I haven't also felt that, but in my relationship, in my marriage that ended badly, there was a lot of emotional abuse that got worse over time. So when the marriage ended, there was a lot of emotional abuse going on, and verbal abuse going on. It wasn't there at the beginning. By the end, it was blown up, right?
Right.
At the beginning of the relationship, there were so many synchronicities and so many, just crazy, incredible synchronicities that I let that convince me that the relationship was, that I was on the right track, so to speak.
Okay.
And at some point, when the relationship stopped being healthy, I looked back at those signs and symbols and synchronicities and miraculous things and used the memory of those things to convince myself, no, that this relationship, it's kind of like the people you're saying. It's like, this is my soulmate. This is where I'm supposed to be. And so if at any point, now look, my whole thing now is that I learned so much, and now I'm an expert on verbal and emotional abuse, and I help people all the time with situations like this. So looking back, I see that I got a great treasure and great value, and I'm able to help the world because of what I went through. However, it would not have been beneficial for me to stay in a relationship that was not healthy once I recognized how unhealthy it was and that the other person did not want to help fix it.
That's right.
And so the point I'm making with law of attraction and relationship is that when there are plenty of opportunities for there to be very subtle, I'm not talking about even physical abuse, but emotional abuse, and subtleties like completely being unseen and unheard and not respected in a relationship. And if that's the kind of relationship that you're in and you're convinced that's your soulmate, well, maybe it's for you to learn how to respect yourself and how to set strong boundaries, and then you can be done and get into another relationship that's healthy and happy.
And in order to do
not
that,
so you can stay in an abusive relationship or one that's not meeting your needs forever.
Yeah, and in order to make that transition, that's pretty much why you're staying in that relationship. I mean, if you want to have a real reason why this person is in your life, it isn't necessarily what you think it is. It's that life is giving you the opportunity to face up to this little weakness in your modality that you've set up, and the one that you insist on continuing to replay over and over again. It's going to keep giving you the opportunity to replay it until you finally say, enough, I'm not going to behave that way anymore. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of the result. I'm done with that. And then you
and I'm worth more than that, right?
And I'm worth more than that, yeah.
Yeah. And then you can create the relationship that you want. Will it be with this same person? I'm not going to say no.
You might be.
Who knows what will happen? When you start treating yourself the way you want to be treated, when you start giving yourself the experiences you want to have, who knows what will happen?
Sure.
People change.
Yep.
And maybe the ex changes and decides to come back. Who knows? But as far as manipulation and using law of attraction to bring someone back, I say you're your own soulmate. Give yourself the experiences that you want to have. Set the strong boundaries. Love yourself. Know that you're worthy of great love. And then see what the universe delivers. Yes.
My wife and I met when we were in our 40s, and we often wondered why it took so long for us to meet each other. Why didn't we meet sooner? And after a little bit of exploration of that, we realized neither one of us were ready for the other. We hadn't gotten through the stuff we needed to get through in order to be ready for each other.
It takes some doing to learn what it takes to be in a healthy relationship. Some of us did not have role models.
Yeah, really.
And so, I too met the love of my life late in life, actually, in my 40s as well. And not to say that anyone listening that if you have to wait till your 40s, that's not true either.
No.
But give yourself the experiences that you want to have. It's on you. Like, take responsibility for having the life that you want.
And that's a great way to end it because we're running out of time. We got to get two more messages in here. One being, if you have not yet subscribed to the podcast, please do so because that's how you don't miss any of these wonderful episodes of all the different topics that we explore. This one was actually a little bit more serious than what we often do, but it was really important. A lot of the episodes they're just fun. We're just laughing halfway, half the time that we're on the show. So it's a great way to really do get your daily dose of happy. You subscribe by going to loatoday.net, or on your iPhone you can go to the iTunes store or to your podcast software, either one, and just use the little magnifying glass to do a search on LOA Today. If you have an Android phone, such as a Samsung or a Google phone or something like that, just go to the Google Play Store, again, search on LOA Today, and you can subscribe. And if somebody's listening who needs a little bit more personal assistance, because these kinds of issues can be really tough, Cindie, how can they get in touch with you for something like that?
They can find me online at cindiechavez.com, CindieChavez.com, or email me at cindy@cindiechavez.com.
All right. Cindie, I think we hit it out of the park again. This has been great. I look forward to doing it again with you next week.
Awesome. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, you do the same. And be sure to come back later today and the rest of the week because we're doing this twice a day, all 5 days of the week. And we'll see you next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.